This is a full story. Couldnt wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. On the day of my severe stomach ulcer diagnosis, my wife Hailey, who had been married to me for 7 years, came home late at night, heavily drunk. Her business partner Tony was holding her waist carefully. Their bodies were pressed closely together, like an inseparable pair of lovers. Hailey reached out her hand to me, just like she had every time before. This time, as I looked at her flushed face from the alcohol, she seemed so unfamiliar. She should have stayed at my place, actually, Tony said with a smile, glancing at me. She got so drunk that she acted like a child, insisting on seeing our son, so I brought her back. His smile was only on his lips, not in his eyes, with a clear hint of provocation. My stomach was in sharp pain, and I pressed my fist against it, unwilling to bend over in front of him. Jack is asleep. I reached out to help the swaying, drunken Hailey, trying to keep my tone steady. Come over here. She just wants to see the kid. After that, we're heading out for a second round, Tony said, not letting go. Why don't you ask her if she wants to stay? She's drunk and lacks the ability to think clearly. This is her home, and we are legally married. She won't go anywhere. Legally married, he sneered, examining the apron I hadn't yet removed. Newspapers get outdated, but do you think a legal marriage will stay fresh forever? My stomach churned violently, and I felt like I might vomit at any moment. My face must have looked ashen and defeated, like a total victim. Please leave my house. He still clung to Hailey's other arm, refusing to give an inch. Don't you want to know what she was doing on the 6th of last month? That question hit me like a heavy hammer. The 6th of last month, Jack's birthday. She hadn't come home that day and had only sent a message saying she was busy with investment work in a neighboring city. When she came back, she showed me the train ticket from that day. What was she doing on that day? During the scuffle, Hailey briefly woke up, looked at me with numbness, then turned to Tony. Tony, why are you at my house? Obviously, you were so drunk that I couldn't just leave you on the street. His tone with Hailey was now completely different, returning to a relaxed and cheerful mode. The tension had dissipated, but I was not interested in their playful banter. I was just thinking that Jack would soon need to get up for a bathroom break. Either make him leave or you go with him. Hailey visibly panicked for a moment and immediately pushed Tony out. Get out, get out. If you show up in front of my husband or child again, I'll make you pay. Tony surrendered, raising his hands in mock compliance, smiling indulgently. All right then, Hailey boss, you begged me to help you with investments, and now you're sending me away without even offering me a cup of tea. Your husband doesn't even acknowledge me properly. Your family really. Don't kick me. I pressed my stomach, which was aching and numb, and finally, as they left in their playful argument, I bent over. Hailey didn't come back for a long time. After taking stomach medicine and waking Jack for his bathroom break, I found him already awake, sitting quietly on his little bed, looking at me. Jack is 5 years old now. His eyes are very much like Hailey's, round and as bright as the star-filled rural night sky of my childhood. He was wearing a crayon Shin-chan pajama, his hair sticking up in a little curl. Despite his young age, he looked troubled. I wasn't sure how much of the outside conversation he had heard. Daddy, I wet the bed, Jack said. I sighed. Daddy told you before what to do if you wet the bed. To stand under the bed and call Daddy to change the sheets. Then why are you still sitting on the bed? Because... Jack slid off the bed and whispered. That uncle spoke a bit harshly and Jack is scared. My hand paused as I was changing the sheets. The child had heard. Will Daddy and Mommy get divorced? Why do you ask that? Our classmate Emily's parents are getting a divorce. She cries every day, Jack said, hugging my leg. Under the warm light of the night lamp, his eyes were red. I don't want to be like her. I picked up Jack. He was increasingly resembling his mother, and I hoped he wouldn't grow up to love alcohol like Hailey. Daddy will not divorce Mommy. At 2 in the morning, Hailey still hadn't returned. I called her, and the ringtone sounded through the door. She had fallen asleep leaning against the front door. Her phone screen lit up with a memo she had written. After sobering up, remember to explain tonight's events to your husband and thoroughly investigate Tony's sexual orientation. It's reasonable to suspect he keeps coming to my house because he has a thing for my husband. I was both amused and frustrated. She has always used her cleverness to make others soft and happy, just as she did when she pursued me in college. Even now, she hasn't changed. Perhaps it's me who has changed. I carried Hailey back to bed and set a glass of honey water on the nightstand. Suddenly, I received 2 Facebook messages. One had a photo of a woman, bruised and battered, wearing a loose t-shirt. The text below read, "My husband abused me again. Jack's dad, can you come save me?" I couldn't help but frown. The sender was Emily's mother, whom I had seen a few times when picking up Jack. Her face was always bruised, and she must have added me from a group. Looking at the time, it was already 2:43 a.m. Such a time is never a moment for people to stay clear-headed. I vaguely understood Alice's message. I silently got out of bed and went to the living room mirror. From the time I quit my job to support Hailey's career 5 years ago until now, I had long forgotten what I looked like. I seemed unchanged, yet somehow transformed completely. Was the person in the mirror still the Rocky she liked back then? One last try, I told myself. One last try. I went back to the bedroom and woke Hailey. She was in a deep sleep, her eyes unfocused and groggy. What's wrong? What happened? I handed her my phone, showing her the Facebook message from Alice. She should understand the woman's intentions better than I did. What would her reaction be to such blatant attention and provocation? Would she demand that I immediately delete this person? Would she insist that I have the nanny pick up the kids? I clenched my fists anxiously. It took her a while to understand. Then she looked up at me blankly and said, each word deliberate, "You woke me up for such a small thing?" In many years since leaving the countryside, I had never felt as embarrassed and ridiculous as I did at this moment. The part of me that had always persisted, endured, and protected seemed to shatter into pieces of glass in an instant, each shard mocking my self-esteem. The lights were out in the bedroom, only the moonlight from outside casting shadows on Hailey's face. I looked at her for a long time, wanting to ask her about the 6th of last month. But as dawn broke, I just deleted Alice's Facebook message. The next day, when I took Jack to school, Hailey was still not up. Before leaving, I habitually leaned down and kissed her forehead, pausing for a moment after the kiss. It turns out that love is a habit, and habits are the hardest things to change. That day, I didn't manage to take Jack to kindergarten. While driving, I received a call from the village head back home. "Rocky, there's something I need to tell you." The village head's voice was cautious, but made me even more uneasy. "What is it?" "Your mother passed away last night." For a moment, my ears rang, and I could barely hear anything. I had to pull the car over to the side of the road, trembling and unable to grip the steering wheel. But Jack was still in the back seat, and I couldn't let anything happen to him. Taking a deep breath, I still couldn't stop the intense pain in my chest. All I remember was trembling and saying, "I'll come back immediately." I bought the earliest flight of the day. Before boarding with Jack, I hesitated for a moment at the name wife on my phone, but eventually I made the call. After waiting a long time with no answer, just as I was about to hang up, Hailey finally picked up. "Wife, my flight is about to take off. I need to switch to airplane mode," she said urgently. "Honey, the company is at a critical stage in Series A, and I have to rush to Xinjiang for an investor meeting. Don't call me unless it's an emergency. If you need money, just use the backup card." I was choked up, my lips trembling. "Are you going alone?" "Going with Tony." Her tone was slightly impatient, clearly wanting to end the call quickly. "What's the matter? Is something wrong at home?" "If there's nothing wrong, I'm hanging up. The flight attendants are urging me to switch to airplane mode." What could be considered a major issue? For me, it's Hailey and Jack. For her, I don't seem to be within that scope. The evening flight arrived at the provincial capital of my hometown. After landing, I took a bus and a tricycle, finally reaching that barren little mountain village in my memory just as dusk was falling. My mother had refused to move to be with us over the years, always saying it's hard to leave her hometown. The elderly are like old trees. Once moved, they are bound to be damaged. But I knew it was because she didn't want to trouble us. Aside from the annual visit and care, and providing her with a better material life to the best of my ability, I hadn't really fulfilled my duty as a son. Hailey's first trip to my hometown was before Jack was born. Looking at the crumbling old mud house, she didn't show any signs of disdain in her round eyes, only sympathy. "This is where you grew up, and I'm not ashamed to speak of it. I'm grateful for this place, and grateful to your mom for raising such a good you," she said. "I will do everything I can to ensure you and your mom have a good life." Now that old mud house has been replaced by a 2-story building, and Hailey has lived up to her word. She has given me so much money and Jack. As for me, I remain in debt, waiting for the moment when love and kindness run out. According to the customs for mourning in the hometown, the body needs to stay in the yard for 3 days before the eldest son smashes a basin, wears mourning clothes, and performs the burial. "Normally, it shouldn't be you smashing the basin," said the village head, puffing on a cigarette and squinting at the mourning pavilion. "You're an adopted son, not her biological child. This kind of thing is considered bad luck. I heard your wife is in business and running a company. She might be superstitious about this. If you don't want to do it, I can arrange for someone else from the village." "No," I said, rubbing my sore eyes and then looking over over at Jack playing with a puppy on the other side of the yard, full of life, a new burst of vitality. I am her son. It should be me. By evening, the worshippers had dispersed. I sat with Jack at the gate of the yard, looking at the fields of rapeseed in the distance, which were in full bloom. I wanted to bury my mother in this land. Dad, what is an adopted child? Grandma is not Jack's biological grandmother, nor is she my biological mother. I said, but she's even better than a biological mother. Jack looked confused, scratching his little head. I pointed to the distant wheat fields. Look, there are many fields here. Each person has their own land, but Grandma doesn't have land. She can only pick up some abandoned, overgrown, and neglected plots from others, slowly clearing the weeds, loosening the soil, planting crops, maybe one plot or two. But sometimes, after she painstakingly clears a small plot, she is chased away by the owner. The land, which was originally unwanted, becomes valuable as soon as she clears it. The owner will immediately come to claim it. Grandma doesn't dare to say anything because the land wasn't originally hers. She just quietly looks for the next abandoned plot. Jack tilted his head and asked softly, and then Grandma used those small, neglected plots to support the adopted dad. And later, Dad became a top scholar in the province. When the interview video was released, the biological parents came to find him, crying and wanting to claim him back. Did Dad go back with his biological grandparents? Jack asked, half understanding. I rubbed his little head. Dad isn't like those neglected plots. I looked back at the morning pavilion where the hardworking old lady lay quietly. The breeze brushed against her clothes, as if returning to that morning when she was still young, sending me off for college entrance exams. She had stuffed 2 freshly boiled eggs into my hands and softly reminded me, get a perfect score. If you get in, don't come back to the mountain village. She didn't understand the rules of the entrance exams, nor did she understand the scores. She only knew to give her son the best, even if it was just the last 2 eggs in the house. I kowtowed deeply 3 times in front of the morning pavilion. A son's filial piety is insufficient. I stayed in my hometown with Jack for 7 days. During those 7 days, Hailey did not send a single message or make a single call. On the night before heading back, I held Jack and slept on the earthen bed where my mother used to sleep. In a daze, I had a dream. I dreamed of the night in the 2nd year of our marriage, when we were both climbing in our careers. I was a general manager SVP in the investment banking circle, with an annual salary of $550,000, excluding the year-end bonus. Hailey's small comic studio was on the brink of closing due to the pandemic. She was seeking investments everywhere and drank so much that she ended up with a bleeding stomach. That day, I carried her home, drunk and disoriented, and asked her, do you really need to work? I didn't know how much she had suffered outside, but as long as she said she was tired and didn't want to work anymore, I would have told her that my "I'll support you" would never turn into "I'm supporting you." I couldn't bear to see the girl who had been shining behind me for 3 years, her eyes bright, getting her feathers wet. I couldn't stand seeing her hurt, sick, or bullied. If possible, she only needed to hide under my wings. But I forgot that she already had phoenix wings and was unwilling to bow to anyone. From tomorrow, try to come home for dinner. If there are any drinking sessions, I'll accompany you. I didn't have the overwhelming strength for her to rely on, so I could only let my girl soar through the skies. If someone needed to step back and compromise in this marriage, I couldn't bear for it to be her. From that day, I transferred all the money I had saved for 2 years to buy a house to Hailey to help her small company get through, and I quit my job to become a full-time house husband. Her stomach wasn't well, and until we could afford a maid, I cooked 3 meals a day for her and blocked all alcohol at social events. The scene in the dream abruptly changed. This time I was in the hospital on the day Hailey gave birth to Jack. I will never forget that day. Nurses rushed back and forth between the operating room and the hallway, their gloves stained with blood, my wife's blood. I stood dazed outside the operating room, feeling as if my soul had been lost, until I heard the doctor say, placental retention. The patient is bleeding heavily during manual placenta extraction. We're getting blood from the blood bank. Can a family member sign the critical condition notice? I vaguely remember it was my father-in-law who signed, because my heart ached so badly that I could hardly breathe. The pain she was experiencing seemed to be crushing my insides in real time. I couldn't hold the pen or see the words clearly. I owe her almost a life. How can I repay that? At the end of the dream, I returned to the scene when Hailey confessed to me in college. She said, Rocky, I've been pursuing you for 3 years. Today I'm the first in the entire department for the first time. You said if my grades could match yours, you would accept my confession. So today, I'm formally confessing to you. Rocky, I've liked you for a long time. I even picked out names for our children. Please be with me. I thought I should refuse. My heart seemed to know that if I refused, there wouldn't be the following years, and we might just pass by each other and meet good people. But after much hesitation, the words I spoke were still, okay. It turns out I still love her. Even today, despite her trampling my dignity into the dirt, I still can't bear to refuse. I truly am worthless. When I woke up, Jack was already awake, propped up on his hands, looking at me. Daddy, why are you crying? I landed the early morning flight just as it was time for Jack to go to kindergarten. The transition from preschool to primary school is crucial, and I didn't want him to miss too many classes. As soon as I got off the plane, I hurriedly took Jack to kindergarten. At 8:30 in the morning, the area outside the kindergarten was filled with parents dropping off their kids. I crouched down and gave Jack a few instructions before pushing him into the school. Just then, someone suddenly slapped me hard on the shoulder. Why did you delete me on Facebook? Before I could turn around, I heard Alice's mother yelling loudly, completely ignoring that the kids were still in class. The surrounding parents looked at us with strange expressions. Alice's mother, even though our children are at the same kindergarten, I don't know you well, and we have no interactions. I don't think it's necessary to keep you on Facebook. I didn't want to talk much with this woman, so I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm and wouldn't let go. Does your wife treat you well? I've never seen her pick up the kids. Is your married life harmonious? I liked you the first time I saw you outside the kindergarten. Why can't you look at me a little more? My face must have looked awful, but my upbringing forbids me from hitting a woman, especially since there was no place left on her face to punch. My wife and my life have nothing to do with you. Please let go. I'm getting a divorce. Alice's mother's eyes were red. I'm getting a divorce for you. I've seen your wife. She's nothing special. She just makes a bit of money. I've heard you used to make a lot of money in investment banking and resign just to stay home with her. Why does she have it all? I can do the housework and take care of the kids. You should divorce her and be with me. Crazy. I shook off her arm and she was thrown to the ground by the force. The fall was quite hard and no one dared to help her up. Alice's mother looked at me with almost hateful eyes. I didn't want to be bothered by a lunatic any longer and turned to leave. On the 6th of last month, your wife wasn't with you, right? Her voice came from behind. I stopped in my tracks. The 6th of last month. Again, the 6th of last month. It seemed like everyone in the world knew where Hailey was on the 6th of last month, except me. Alice's mother slowly got up from the ground and approached me. I instinctively took a step back, but she just shoved 2 photos into my jacket pocket. I have photos that I can show you, but you need to promise me that after you've seen them, you'll divorce her. And then her expression became awkward. Consider being with me. Impossible, don't dream. When Alice's mother heard this, she immediately acted like a lunatic, grabbing my clothes and shouting, "Help, help, he assaulted me. Call the police." This woman is both foolish and wicked, and her foolishness is clearly greater. The surveillance footage outside the kindergarten recorded everything accurately. After reviewing it, the police were also speechless and only said that I needed to have a family member sign some documents before I could leave. I hesitated in front of my phone for a long time. It was almost noon, so she should have been free. Half an hour later, Hailey arrived in a hurry. After learning about the incident from the police, she didn't show any emotion and teased, "My husband is so handsome, it's normal for someone to have a crush." I watched her through the glass. Today, she wore a camel-colored knitted dress and matching wedge shoes, with her accessories and makeup perfectly coordinated. She looked as radiant as a princess, just like before. Taking out the 2 photos from my jacket pocket, I saw Alice's mother sitting handcuffed on the opposite side, showing a victorious smile. I took her to the small food street behind the university. Many of the shops had changed over the years since graduation. Seeing that the familiar beef noodle shop was still there, I felt a slight sense of relief, as if the heavens had given me another chance. The owner was a kind, elderly couple. The elderly woman remembered us and greeted us with a smile. "You two haven't been here for years. Do you still want the same as before?" "Same as before. 2 bowls," I said. "1 bowl." Hailey seemed tired as she rubbed her temples. "I'm not eating. I have 2 meetings later and need to get back." She no longer remembered the significance of this shop, just as she had long forgotten the meaning of our marriage. I quietly finished a bowl of noodles and then placed my chopsticks across the bowl. I softly said, "June 6th of last month was Jack's birthday." She was taken aback for a moment, frowned, and then seemed a bit guilty as she touched her nose. I watched her, and after a while, her face seemed unfamiliar. I asked her word by word, "Where were you that night?" I had never used such an interrogative tone with her before. Hailey immediately became annoyed. Eva explained, "That night, I went on a business trip to the neighboring city. The company's reimbursement documents are still there. If you don't believe me, you can." I threw the 2 photos on the table, and she was immediately at a loss for words. They were 2 photos taken surreptitiously. The bottom corner of the photos showed the date as June 6th of last month. Since they were taken with a phone and then developed, They appeared somewhat distorted, but it was still clear who was in them. The man walking into the hotel was Tony, and the woman he was holding was my wife, Hailey. Who gave you these photos? Hailey's first reaction was not to explain. I watched her calmly, waiting for an explanation, but none came. It was Alice's mother who gave them to me today. She wants me to divorce you, I said. Is there anything you need to explain? As long as you explain, I will believe you. I can doubt anything except this. Once suspicion arises, there's no turning back. What do I need to explain? She looked completely unreasonable, even a bit angered by my behavior. She stood up with her bag. You're not going to believe a crazy woman's claim, are you? She wants you to divorce me. Do you want to divorce me? The moment the word divorce came from her mouth, my heart ached sharply, followed by intense pain in my stomach. Indeed, the severe gastric ulcer caused by excessive drinking over the years has made me avoid beef noodles. I pressed my hand on my stomach and took a deep breath. I don't want a divorce. I want an explanation. She didn't say anything more and turned away irritably. I sat in the shop for a very long time, long enough for the beef broth at the bottom of the bowl to form a thick layer of red oil, long enough for the shop to have only me as the customer. The elderly woman sat across from me and wiped her hands with an apron. People's hearts don't turn cold in a day, she sighed gently. Young man, times have changed. Back in our days, marriage was like a refrigerator. Last 3 years, break down for 3 years, repair and patch up for another 3 years. Now, when it breaks, you throw it away and get a new one. No one thinks about repairing it anymore. What if it really can't be repaired? That depends on whether the other party can turn back. She propped herself up with her knees and knocked on her lower back. If your stomach hurts, don't eat spicy food. I'll make you a bowl of clear soup noodles. Look at how much weight you've lost. Speak up. Tony glanced at his Rolex. What do you need? I know about the events of the 6th of last month, I said. I'll only ask you once. Did you touch her? Tony smiled. It seems you've already asked her. If she had answered you, you wouldn't have come to me. You only need to tell me, yes or no. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. Late at night, hotel, drunkenness, a man and a woman alone. What do you think? Before he finished speaking, my fist uncontrollably smashed into his nose. I had always prided myself on being clear-headed and self-controlled, but whenever it came to anything related to Hailey, I would erupt in a way that even shocked myself. Perhaps subconsciously, her importance to me had long exceeded my own awareness. Tony staggered back a couple of steps, and when he came to his senses, he raised his fist to hit me. His gym-trained physique had no real power behind it. After enduring a couple of blows, he leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. Rocky, even if you beat me to death, it won't help. Hailey's heart hasn't been with you for a long time. He laughed more and more triumphantly, with the cut on his mouth seeming to be a mark of victory. I'll tell you, I've known her since high school. I liked her back then. Who are you to come in halfway? I'm her white moonlight. Look, I just returned from studying abroad, and she came to me to invest and start a company. That's the power of a white moonlight. So, what if she's a white moonlight? I bitterly mocked myself. Over time, a white moonlight can turn into mosquito bites. No one can escape. That night, while putting Jack to sleep, the child wouldn't settle down and looked at me with some understanding. Are you and Mom getting a divorce? Yes. I couldn't look directly into his innocent eyes. If that happens, who do you want to stay with? Without hesitation, he said, Mom. Why? Because Dad spoiled Mom. If Dad leaves, Jack will stay to take care of Mom. Look, even the child understands, but it took me 7 years to see clearly how pitifully foolish I am. Tonight, Hailey came back earlier than usual. I didn't turn on the living room light and waited in the darkness. I waited for her to go to the bedroom to check on the kids, and for her to carefully touch my finger, a small gesture she usually made when she had done something wrong and angered me. Let's talk. She followed me through the living room. This empty, spacious house, every piece of furniture and decoration was bought with her money, leaving no trace of me. It was time to leave. Hailey, we're getting a divorce. She was stunned for a second. What did you say? I'll have the divorce agreement drafted and sent to your company by tomorrow. I don't want any of the property, just Jack. When I stood up, a sudden pain struck my stomach. I realized I had waited too long in the darkness and had forgotten to take my medication. I don't agree. She blocked my way, one hand gripping the door tightly, visibly panicked. I said I don't agree. I looked down at her, hoping she would calmly accept a clean breakup. But in the next moment, she said something I couldn't have dreamed of. You want a divorce? You still want Jack? How will you support him? Do you think the court will award my son to whom? A company president worth $70 million, or an unemployed stay-at-home dad? People's hearts don't turn cold in an instant, but overwhelming despair and pain can instantaneously become sharp knives, slicing away every self-righteous and self-sentimental emotion from the past. I felt like laughing until I was on the edge of collapse. "What are you laughing at?" she asked. "I'm laughing at," I said, "myself." "Darling," she sighed, clearly showing weakness, something she was not good at. "Don't get a divorce. Tell me what I did wrong, and I'll change." I turned to leave. "If you don't sign the divorce agreement, I can file for separation after 2 years. Think about it." "Rocky," she yelled and threw a pillow on my back. I felt nothing because my limbs were already numb and cold, as if in the middle of a harsh winter. I rented a place close to Jack's kindergarten so I could see him off to school and pick him up every day. I then contacted Peter, a former colleague from the investment bank in Jiangbei. At the beginning of the year, he had a fallout with his old company and started his own firm. He had reached out to me, hoping I could provide some technical support, but Jack's constant illnesses made me unable to help at the time. Now, when I contacted him again, he was still very enthusiastic. "I didn't expect you to come around. I thought you'd be all about the wife and kids for the rest of your life." Although Peter wasn't nearsighted, he wore gold-rimmed glasses which, paired with his brown suit, made him look sharp and cunning. He tapped the table with his finger. "Rocky, we used to be colleagues, and I know your business capabilities well and respect them. It's an honor for me that you're willing to join my small company. But you also know, our company has only been established for a little over 6 months, and our funds are tight. In investment banking, only big companies with backgrounds get the benefits. The deal here can't compare with what you had before. I understand." I clasped my hands on my knees and said calmly, "Before the company gets on track, I only need money for rent and food." "Well," he was unsure whether to be happy or not, biting his lip, unable to resist being curious. "I heard your wife's company is quite large. Is everything problematic, even for food expenses?" I stood up. "When can I start?" "As soon as possible. Today would be even better." Peter understood that good steel should be used on the cutting edge, so he offered me a position starting as deputy general manager rather than working my way up from an assistant analyst. I needed to work twice as hard to make up for the 5 lost years. I could only try to fill my schedule to avoid thinking too much about Jack. I didn't delete any of her contact information, just set it to silent and stopped responding. In the short span of a month, she sent me thousands of messages, ranging from defenses and reflections to pleas and admissions of guilt. She talked about her drunken mistakes and sober realizations, mentioned the trivial details of our college days, and frequently update me on Jack's growth. Even though I had set her messages to silent, I still found myself clicking on them from time to time. It was a habit I couldn't break. 2 months later, Peter's company had secured 3 small but significant deals and was gradually getting on track. He started inviting me out more frequently, carefully probing about my marital situation. At first, I didn't understand his intentions until one day he brought his investor's daughter to a private gathering. "Mr. Peter, what's the meaning of this?" I asked. "No special meaning." Peter leaned in and hinted subtly. "This young lady is 8 years younger than you, comes from a good family, and is quite beautiful. She's shown interest in you through her father a few times. The girl is genuinely infatuated with you. You're quite the catch, Rocky. Still charming in your 30s, huh?" The girl across from me was only 24, just starting her career. She had taken a few sips of white wine, her cheeks flushed, and she looked at me unabashedly. I thought of Hailey right after graduating from college, radiant like a flower adorned with morning dew, as if a gentle shake could scatter the freshest morning drops. "I'm not divorced, Mr. Peter. Please don't arrange things like this for me in the future." Peter was taken aback and seemed somewhat embarrassed. "Just give it a try. We're counting on her father's investment, Rocky. You're not at a loss." I stood up and prepared to leave. "Enjoy the rest of your evening. I have to go." As soon as I stepped out, Peter caught up with me, his anger fueled by alcohol. "Rocky, what are you doing? Is your wife worth waiting for? Is she worth your loyalty? I've heard people say she's been unfaithful to you. Can you really tolerate that? That woman is just a..." I hadn't had a drop of alcohol that day, but my fist landed on Peter's face with a deafening impact. After Peter sobered up, he personally apologized and didn't press charges for the injury. No matter how earnest his apology, I still submitted my resignation and returned to my previous company. Peter had helped me through the toughest times, and I had helped him stabilize his business. The debt of gratitude was cleared. Things in this world are like that. Once all debts are settled, separation follows. I wasn't sure if Hailey and I were truly clear of each other. Our entanglement was too deep and tight. The seeds planted in my heart had grown into towering trees. If they were to be uprooted, I didn't know how devastating the consequences would be. The next day, I watched from a distance as Jack went to school. I saw Hailey dropping him off. Previously, it had always been the nanny who handled the pickups and drop-offs. I hadn't seen her in a long time. She had become so thin, like a piece of paper that could blow away with the wind. My heart heart ached uncontrollably. When you love someone deeply, pain becomes a natural physiological response. That evening, as I left work and reached the entrance of the building, I ran into the investor's daughter from that dinner party. She was holding a bouquet of sunflowers. I didn't know how long she had been waiting, but the sunflowers' leaves were starting to wilt. Seeing me approach, her eyes brightened, and she greeted me warmly, introducing herself. "My name is Wendy. Can I pursue you?" She also had bright, round eyes, a beautiful appearance, and a privileged background. "Sorry, I'm married." Unfortunately, she wasn't Hailey. Once again, I found myself clicking on her Facebook page by some odd compulsion. I saw a message from Hailey sent half an hour ago. "Jack has food poisoning and is at the People's Hospital. What should I do? What should I do?" By the time I came to my senses, I was already running down the hospital corridor. Through the small window of the ward, I saw Jack had stabilized after his stomach was pumped and he was receiving 4 fluids. I didn't see Hailey in the ward. As I was about to turn the corner, I heard her voice. She was talking with Tony. "Rocky's lip injury. Did you do that?" Tony didn't deny it. He said, "He hit me first. He found me and asked about your son's birthday. I told him we slept together." I heard Hailey's voice, filled with shock and exhaustion. Why lie and destroy my family? "I've liked you for nearly 15 years, Tony said openly. "Since high school, I liked you before he did. I saw you first. He didn't respect the order of things. I was thrilled when you came to me for partnership after starting your business. You know how happy I was. When he came to me that day, I knew the opportunity had arrived. Such opportunities might only come once because you don't know how much patience and determination it takes for a man to seek confirmation from another man about his wife's infidelity, especially for a proud man like Rocky. I know my methods are despicable and my actions are filthy, but I don't regret it." He said it with an air of self-satisfaction, as if he was proud of it. "Now that he's gone, it's my turn. I'll take good care of you and Jack. Treat Jack as my own son. We've always been compatible, haven't we?" So this was the full picture of the situation. The reason she didn't want to explain was not infidelity, but the suspicion she was facing. They didn't speak for a long time. The hospital corridor was eerily quiet late at night. Finally, Hailey said, "We need to separate." "What did you say?" Tony's voice reached a deafening pitch, and a few passing nurses glanced over frequently. "Separate before the company goes public? Are you crazy?" Hailey's voice was frighteningly hoarse. "Maybe so. Maybe I am crazy." The first weekend after joining the new company, there was a team-building event, and I saw a familiar face at the dinner. A woman elegantly holding a highball glass approached with a radiant smile, moving gracefully. I recognized her as Steven, Hailey's college roommate. "So you're working here now. What a coincidence," Steven said. She exuded the sophisticated charm of a successful woman, unlike Hailey, who, despite being a chairwoman, still seemed like a young girl. "Hello, Mr. Chen. I've only been back for a short time, too. You know, Hailey has been looking for you all this time, even reporting it to the police." Steven raised an eyebrow. "So, Mr. Rocky, are you really planning to abandon your wife and child? The person being abandoned was never her." Steven continued, "But since you left, she's grown a lot. I heard she's quit drinking. Is that so?" I fiddled with the wedding ring on my left hand, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. "She's taken good care of the child, too. When I visited your home, that little bundle of joy clung to my leg like a 1,000-pound weight. I couldn't help but smile, picturing Jack's adorable face and how he must have been happy in Hailey's arms." And Steven leaned in mysteriously. "She and Tony have completely separated. This is quite a big deal in the industry. Divorcing before the company goes public and cutting off all ties with a business partner. In my over 10 years in the field, I've never heard of such self-destruction." A jolt of shock hit my heart. She really separated before the IPO? The company is her life. She must be mad. Yes, she is. She's a thorough madwoman. Back then, she stood downstairs in your dorm for 3 years waiting for you to turn off the lights, secretly gave money to the cafeteria lady to ensure you got your food without any mistakes, stayed up all night studying to fulfill your promise of being the top of the department, lost 20 pounds in a month to fit into that dress you casually mentioned, and almost risked her life giving birth to your child. Now, for you, she's destroyed the company, her career, which was more important to her than her own life. I was speechless. She had given everything for me, her whole life, without reservation. You protected her too well before. Maybe even she didn't realize it." Steven sighed, gently swirling her wine glass. "To her, you were always more important than her own life." Her tone was calm and her voice steady, but it was deafening. lingering in the air. She patted my shoulder, her smile tinged with pity. Hailey is grown up now. What about you? Are you really willing to endure the suffering of benefiting from the efforts of others? I understand your point. Thank you, Stephen. A phone call interrupted at an inopportune moment. It was an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was cold. Hello, this is the North City Police Station. Your wife has been involved in a fight and is injured. Could you come by? When I arrived at the police station, the scene was chaotic. Alice's mother was slapping my wife. Jack was shouting, "Don't hit my mom!" By the time I realized what was happening, I had grabbed Alice's mother's arm tightly, uncontrollably trying to break the hand that had hit Hailey. No one could hit her, not even me. The police separated Alice's mother from us and explained the situation. Apparently, she had come to Hailey's place to provoke her right after her own divorce. So what triggered the fight? I asked. The female officer pursed her lips. It seems Alice's mother said something insulting about you. Something like Ninja Turtles, which made your wife act first. I looked at Alice's mother, whose face was bruised and swollen, and then at Hailey, whose hair was disheveled but who still managed to give me a victorious smile. As always, she never let herself be taken advantage of. Good job, my wife. After getting the police's permission, I had a brief conversation with Alice's mother, who was demanding compensation. I asked a friend to check on you on the way here. You and your husband should still be in the cooling off period and haven't received the divorce certificate yet. Her arrogance immediately subsided, and she looked down, mumbling, "Yes, it's a cooling off period, but we're going to divorce soon. Can you? Whether you're divorced or not means nothing to me," I said calmly. But as far as I know, you've taken all the household assets, and your husband is looking for you everywhere. After this month, you could use the domestic violence injury report as a basis for a lawsuit, right? Yes. So if someone reports your whereabouts to your husband within this month, the consequences. No, don't. She urgently tried to grab my sleeve. Don't do this. I'm doing this for you. I withdrew my hand calmly. Domestic violence is unforgivable. You should divorce, but not for me. Do it for yourself and your child. I know. So I won't reveal your whereabouts to your husband, but on the condition that you agree with me. Never harass me or my family again, ever. Otherwise, even if you divorce smoothly, I still have 100 ways to deal with you. Alice's mother bowed her head deeply. The arrogance and aggressiveness completely drained away. Only dissatisfaction and envy for others' happiness remained. Why? Tears fell one by one onto her lap. Why does Hailey get such a good husband, and I have to suffer? There is no fairness in this world, just like there's no reason behind the fate and entanglements between people. Love and hate have no logic. I'll ask one last time. I looked down at her. Do you agree to my terms? I agree. It was already early morning when I left the police station. The moon was beautiful tonight and the breeze was gentle. Hailey walked ahead while I held Jack and followed slowly. She said, "I've sold my company shares at market price to other shareholders. I won't be in control anymore. Let them do whatever they want. I'm retired." Yes, she really has changed a lot. I've been taking good care of Jack lately. He's gained 3.5 pounds. You should notice. Yes, he's definitely gained weight. Jack will start elementary school in September. I've chosen a few schools and can't decide. Private schools have good environments, while public ones have better teaching and graduation rates. But the child will be stressed. What do you think? If it were up to me, I'd choose based on what makes Jack happiest. I can cook now, and I know you deliberately had Steven reveal the information to me. Do you think I'm dumb? That wasn't intentional. Also, I want to sell this house and buy a bigger one near your company or rent this one out. I'll go check out some properties near your company tomorrow. Really? Noticing I had stopped, she quickly ran back, looking nervously at me. What's wrong? I understand what happened with Tony now. I'm misunderstood. She playfully touched her nose, just like she did in college. So did you file for divorce because you thought I was unfaithful? No, I said immediately. So you think I'd file for divorce just because I thought you were unfaithful? The mistake that should have been punished 1,000 times over wasn't infidelity, or rather, it wasn't entirely the assumed infidelity. It was the accumulated neglect and continually extinguished hope. People are like that. They take what they have for granted. The process of turning a beloved thing into something insignificant was more painful than imagined. But in the end, I surrendered to the reluctance in my heart, to the spoiled girl I had nurtured, who had nowhere to turn from now on. Fortunately, I knew she had grown and learned. Hailey didn't say more and simply stood on tiptoe to kiss me. It was almost dawn. "Let's go home, dear." I responded and added, "No more fighting in front of the kids." Okay. I held Jack in one arm and took Hailey's hand with the other, as if these hands were my life's anchor. It had started to snow at some point, and the fine snowflakes fell on her hair. I raised my hand, but couldn't bear to brush them off. The world was quiet, the sky flickering. We walked hand in hand towards home. Through the years we had never shared, and through the many years we would spend together in the future, moving towards ever brighter and warmer days. The end. If you enjoyed Hailey's story, please like and subscribe to Kitten's channel with updates every morning at 9 a.m.